This $500,000 home in Clarence or this $500,000 home in Amherst? Trick question. After analyzing recent sales, I've discovered something that's completely changing the game between these two townships. I'm Michelle Petrie, your Buffalo area and suburban lifestyle real estate expert, and by the end of this video, you'll discover which of these two townships fits your budget and your lifestyle. Let's start with location and commute times. So Clarence is located about 25 to 45 minutes away from downtown, depending on what part of Clarence you are in. Obviously, Clarence can be closer, and there are aspects of Clarence that are farther away from the city. Clarence doesn't have always the closest direct route to the highway or expressway, so it might take more time driving in regular town roads to get to a faster commute time. Whereas Amherst, actually part of Amherst borders the city of Buffalo. Not downtown, but borders the edge of the city of Buffalo. So it can be much quicker to get to downtown than if you were in East Amherst, which is much farther and actually closer to Clarence. Ironically, Amherst borders on the city of Buffalo, Tonawanda, Cheektowaga, Lockport, and Clarence. Whereas Clarence borders on Amherst, Lockport, Akron, and Lancaster. They are right next door to each other, these townships, but the commute time can vary dramatically because Clarence is known for more of being a more farm town. Until 20 years ago, there was very little housing there compared to what it is now. It was farther out from the city. Now we're still farther out, but it has become such a more populated area. When it comes to cost of living between these two townships, they are very similar, except when it comes down to one very important thing. And that one thing are taxes. Taxes in Amherst actually just got reevaluated this past year and increased 11%. So taxes went through the roof in Amherst this year. Historically speaking, Clarence has lower taxes than any other township in the area. You might find similar properties in Amherst versus Clarence, but your taxes in Clarence are going to be significantly lower for arguably a similar property. One thing that isn't great about Clarence taxes is that your garbage and recycling is not included. There's usually two different companies that you would hire out for your garbage and recycling that aren't included in your taxes, but that is included in Amherst taxes. I personally don't think that that's a big enough difference annually to make Amherst taxes so much more than Clarence taxes. One really great advantage is that there are some areas of Clarence that you can live in Clarence, but then go to Williamsville School Districts, which is a school district in Amherst. So a lot of people opt for that because they have the benefit of the Clarence taxes, but going to Williamsville School District. Getting into the school districts later on, that is a whole different ball game. Regarding lifestyle costs, groceries, gas, those kind of things are arguably the same, very similar in both areas, so that should be a very minimal consideration when you're thinking about Clarence versus Amherst living. The community character between these two townships couldn't be more distinct. Amherst has a population of over 100,000 more than Clarence. They, size-wise, are the same square miles. They're about 53 square miles each. However, Clarence has a population of about 34,000, whereas Amherst has about 133,000. So 100,000 difference in population. Clarence, as I said before, was known for being a farm town, but has become so much more populated in the last 25 years that it's grown so much. But there is still so much more land left in Clarence. A lot of it, though, cannot be developed because it is wetlands. So a lot of that will remain open space and will never be developed. There is still wetlands and a lot of that in Amherst as well, but the space available there is very minimal. So when we look at Amherst, there are so many different pockets of Amherst because it is so much more populated. We have Eggertsville, which is closer to Cheektowaga and the city of Buffalo. We have East Amherst, which is closer to Clarence. We have upper parts of East Amherst that are closer to Lockport. We have Amherst schools with Sweet Home that border Tonawanda. So when we talk about the different areas that we have, those in Amherst that are closer to Tonawanda, they have access to Niagara Falls Boulevard, which has Home Depot, Lowe's, Best Buy, a lot of restaurants, gyms, Raymore and Flanagan. I mean, everything that you could really want. The only Trader Joe's in all Buffalo area and Whole Foods. So if you're living more on that part of Amherst, you're gonna have access to those aspects very, very easily. And the 290 is right there in many different areas. So you can jump on to the 290 and have highway access very, very quickly. When you're looking and talking more about East Amherst, which is closer to the Clarence border, that is gonna have more of a Main Street vibe when we're thinking of the Williamsville area. A lot of those people are very close to Williamsville and Main Street, where there's a lot of bars, restaurants, mom and pop shops. You do have the expressway right there that you can jump on. You're gonna get a lot different vibe and a more old school vibe where you have a lot of older homes off of Main Street, more culture. There's festivals and a lot of stuff to do over the summertime right on Main Street. Now, when we look at Clarence, there's just Clarence. Technically, there's Clarence and there's Clarence Center and there's the Hollow. The Hollow is actually where my husband grew up. The Main Street there is not like the Main Street in Amherst. Main Street in Clarence is a pathway, and the Main Street in Clarence can bring you all the way through to Akron and all the way through to Pembroke in that area, but it's not something that you're necessarily gonna, hang out on Main Street, be able to walk to tons and shops and things like that. But when you think of Clarence, you think of just Clarence as a whole. It's a very tight-knit community. A lot of people don't leave once they move to Clarence. And if they do leave, they're moving to like Florida. They're moving out of the area, like out of Buffalo. They're not leaving Clarence to go to any other township most of the time, which means that there are less homes for sale annually than there are in Amherst and other townships as well. It's just very, very, very tight. So that can be a huge pro when you're coming into the community and have support systems, but it can also be a negative because it's hard to break into that. We all know how that is. School districts happen to be one of the biggest factors when families are moving townships or moving to the area, and each of these townships brings something unique to the table. When we look at Amherst, there are 3 different school districts. You have Williamsville, Amherst, and Sweet Home. Sweet Home and Amherst are closer to the Tonawanda and Cheektowaga borders, where when you look at Williamsville, that encompasses the village of Williamsville and East Amherst and those areas. Very interesting about Williamsville school districts, they have 3 high schools. You can set up tours to go into each of the high schools. And something else to consider is, yes, your particular home that you're looking at in Williamsville might say that you are Williamsville North, but most years they have open enrollment. What you would have to do though is provide transportation to the school for your child, for that particular high school within the district. Each one of those high schools has a different feel and teaching system associated with it. And it's something you're really going to want to look into if you're thinking about moving to the Amherst area, because you want your child to associate best with each school, and each child can go to a different school as well. When we think about Clarence schools, there is just one high school. Both Clarence and Williamsville schools are top rated in Western New York and in the state as a whole. So you're really not losing on either front. It's just dependent on how you want to approach the situation for you, your kids, and your family. And that's why I mentioned earlier that a lot of people like having that area where you can live in Clarence, have Clarence taxes, but go to Williamsville schools if that's something that you choose. It takes a lot of thought process and maybe a very slim area for which you can buy if that's the area you want to be in. But there is so many options for which you can hit every single area that you want, and every single aspect meets the needs of you and your family. Now for the numbers you've been waiting for: home prices and the market. Both townships have seen dramatic shifts in the last few years, but ironically, they're both moving in the same positive direction. When it comes to Clarence versus Amherst in regards to home styles, Amherst has a lot more first-time home buyers, starter homes, smaller homes that are more affordable than there is in Clarence. There's just not as many. We see a lot more bigger homes, more expensive high-end homes in Clarence. There are a lot of those in Amherst as well, in the East Amherst area, but as we've talked about, the population is so much larger in Amherst. We see a lot more diversity across people as well as the homes themselves. When we look at home prices, we actually see higher prices for an average home sale in Clarence. So the average home sale in 2024 was $180,000 more than it was in Amherst. So Amherst was valued for the average home was $405,000, whereas the average home in Clarence was $587,000. So there's a very big difference there. There were only about a third amount of sales in Clarence last year in 2024 than there were in Amherst, but that also goes back to the population is only about a quarter in Clarence than there is in Amherst. So there's a lot of factors to consider there. When you're a first-time buyer, someone that's looking for a more affordable home, you're probably looking more in the Amherst area because there's a lot more to choose from and you can afford a lot more than if you were to go to Clarence. Smaller homes are priced much higher. I find that Clarence has a lot more competitive market than we do in Amherst. Again, that depends on how the home is priced, marketed, when it's listed. There's a lot of factors that go into that. Check more about that on my video for how to sell a home effectively in the area, because you'll sell it fast in both areas depending on all those different aspects and the agent that you choose. Whether you're more drawn to the easy access and the Main Street vibe of Amherst or open spaces and tight-knit community of Clarence, they both offer very unique aspects. The best choice really comes down to your lifestyle, priorities, and your budget. I help buyers and sellers in both communities every single day, and I'm part of those communities myself. If you have any questions, reach out to me through DM, text, or email.